Okay, good afternoon. Today we are going to discuss a new topic, that's emotion. After motivation, we are going to discuss about the term emotion. As we know, the word motive is derived from the word movere, and as well as the emotion, the word emotion is derived from the Latin word emovere, which means to stir up or to move. Again, both are the part of dynamics of psychology or the dynamism of the individual. So both the meaning has same derivatives or same meaning. So here the word emotion is also typically by the word, it means to move. So it's also to make some actions by the individual. Okay, so how we can define this term? Let's define this term as it's a complex reaction it's a complex reaction pattern involving experiential, behavioral and physiological elements. It's a definition given by American Psychological Association, that's emotion of an individual is a complex pattern which involves experiential component, behavioral component and physiological elements. That means the APA has defined the term emotion in terms of its components or its elements. That means this process is a very complex one which involves three different components. That means the person has an experience of something when he is experiencing he is in certain kinds of emotion, and there will be some behavioral changes based on that feeling, and also there will be some physiological changes in the body of that organism. So emotion, when we hear the term emotion, we can list a number of emotions that we experience daily in our lives, like happiness, joy, anger, hostility, like that. There are a number of emotions. So in a single word, we can define emotion as a complex reaction pattern involving experiential, behavioral and physiological elements. So how, apart from these components, how we can make it into another form of sentence into define this term is, it's a subjective conscious experience accompanied by bodily arousal and by characteristic overt expressions. That means what? Whenever we are in certain kinds of emotion, that means whenever we are happy, there will be certain kinds of physiological changes in our body based on the happiness or whatever emotion that we are experiencing, and based on that physiological changes, there will be certain kinds of behavioral changes also. So it's always associated with the individual's mood, temperament, personality, disposition and motivation. So everyone's emotion is based on all these factors. So looking into the components, as we are explained the definition based on the components, now let's discuss what are the major components or elements of emotion. So we know emotion is a process which encompasses these three components. So what are these components? First one is physiological component. What is meant by physiological component? Physiological component is definitely the physiological changes within our bodies, like shifts in heart rate, blood pressure, etc. So it may be in the form of like shivering, sweating, whatever the bodily changes or the visceral changes happening in the body of the organism during the emotional experience. So it's the physiological part. For example, when we are in fear, we know some kinds of physiological changes happen in our body. As the adrenaline of our body secretes more, our sympathetic nervous system get activated. So obviously there will be certain kinds of physiological changes in the body accordingly to face that fear. That will enhance our energy level and that will energize our body. So like that, there will be definitely certain kinds of physiological changes for every kind of emotion. So the next component is cognitive component. Cognitive component is something related with our thought process. So the subjective cognitive state or the personal experience we label as emotion. Based on the physiological change or based on the situational information, how we are labeling that particular situation or that particular experience, that is termed as the cognitive component of emotion. So that is related with our affective part. So based on that cognition we are experiencing, or based on that perception, okay, now I am experiencing fear, okay, now I am happy, Okay, now I am excited, now I am surprised. Like that, we are labeling our emotion based on the cognitive component. So that part is coming under the cognitive component. And the third one is behavioral component. Behavioral component, as we know, behavior is the outward expressions of our actions or our responses towards the situational stimuli. So behavioral components involves expressive behaviors or the outward signs of these internal reactions based on the physiological changes and based on the cognitive process or our labeling or our feeling. We are doing some kinds of action. Sometimes we'll how, wow, some kinds of expressions may be coming from ourselves towards outside that can be observed by others. Sometimes we may clap, sometimes we may jump, sometimes we may cry. So such kind of actions coming under the behavioral component. So behavioral component is associated with the behavioral expression, and cognitive component is related with our thinking process or how we are experiencing that particular situation, and physiological component is related with our bodily changes. Okay, so now let's move on to the characteristics of emotion. So when we are discussing about what is emotion and what are the components of emotion, definitely we should know what is the nature of this process. So this nature is listed as the characteristic features of the process of emotion. So here we are mainly discussing 5 characteristic features. We can just explain based on their names. First one is it is temporary or transitory in nature. That means emotions can be changed from one situation to another. It's very temporary. It will last for some time, maybe for some few seconds, some few minutes, some for hours, or very rarely for days. So emotions are temporary in nature. And the second one is its valence or quality. That means what? Every emotion has its own power of valence. That means its own quality. Either it may be positive or it may be negative. That means for some emotions like happy, joy, happiness, joy, surprise, we may feel good. And for certain kinds of emotion, it will make us feel bad. So that is the balance or quality of the emotion. And the third one is emotion is associated to some degree, it is passive. That means it's not completely passive, but it's to some extent it's passive. That means what? Yeah, it is, we don't have the freedom to choose always what we have to feel right now. To some extent we can control, but there are some other conditions that we can't control to fullest. So to a great extent emotions are sometimes passive. It may happen quite naturally. We can make full control over it. Okay. So the fourth characteristics, it's completely related with the individual's experience. That means we know what emotions are feel like for us. The person is really experiencing that particular situation or that particular mood or that particular effect. So when the happiness for the same kind of thing may be experiencing differently for two individuals. So it's related with the individual's experience. And the third one, it's learned. Emotion is associated with your learning or with our learning. That means it's learned by the individual how to express our emotions, how to experience our emotions. Most of the time it's learned by the past experience and the other knowledge gained by the individual. So these are the 5 important characteristic features of emotion. They are temporary or transitory in nature and valence or quality, and to some degree they are passive, and it's related with the individual's experience and it is learned. And in the next slide we are going to discuss about the functions of emotion. So mainly the functions of emotions are explained in 3 main headings. So the first one is it prepares us for action. That means it helps us to react. Yes, Emotions act as a link between events in our environment and our responses. That means, for example, when we are in fear, definitely we have to either escape from the situation or we have to face the situation, right? So that experience of fear is helping us to respond either in a flight mode or in a fight mode. So every emotion basically prepare us for action. So hope that point is clear for you. And the second function, very important function of emotion, is it helps to shape behavior of an individual. That means what kind of emotions most of the time we are experiencing. Basically, when we are discussing about the components of emotion, we are already listed that all emotions have the behavioral components based on the cognitive and physiological component. So emotions always shapes what we are expressing, how we are behaving in front of others. So it has a ability to shape our behavior in proper way. So emotions promote learning that will help us make appropriate responses in the future. So based on our emotions, we are expressing our behavior. So emotional control and emotional regulation, all this helps us how to behave properly, appropriately and adequately in front of others. So emotions helps to shape our own behaviors. And the third but most important function of the emotion is it regulates social interaction and facilitate communication. That means what? As we know, we are social animals. So unlike other animals, we have some social responsibility. We have to be socialized enough to lead a successful life. So emotions helps us to communicate, and it provides us to read from others what they are or really want to communicate with us. The emotions helps us, the knowledge regarding emotion and the emotions helps us to easily understand their situation and their responses. So it helps us to mold our communication, way of communication in response to that. So it easily facilitates our social interaction with other people and our communication. So we often communicate non-verbally also. We know that when I'm raising my eyes in your class, you know that I am in search of something, or maybe I'm angry, but most of the time I'm raising my eyebrows, you know, maybe it's due to anger or maybe surprise, or I'm looking for some details, but you will be able to differentiate what is my purpose, right? So where you are getting that knowledge? I'm not communicating verbally anything, but from my non-verbal expression, from my facial expression, you are becoming able to interpret that correctly. So that will help you to communicate properly back to me, right? So that is. And when I am teaching in the class, I know you, I can read your faces, right? And I can rearrange my class accordingly, whether you are getting my points or whether you are in a error, right? So the communication, so it fosters communication and our interaction. So these are the main functions of emotion, that is prepare us for action, shape behavior of an individual and regulate social interaction and facilitate communication. And now we are moving towards an important aspect of emotion, that is types of emotion. Based on certain criteria, we are dividing emotion differently. As we know, as we are defined emotion, we already mentioned some examples, right? Happy, anger. We know both of the emotions are from different angles. One is based on the valence, it is feel good emotion, and one is feel bad emotion. So based on that, we are dividing emotion into two, that is positive and negative emotion. And whether the emotion is arising from the primary response or it is based on another emotion, we are dividing emotion into two, that is primary versus secondary emotion. So we'll go in detail with that. What is positive emotion? Positive emotion means pleasant emotions like amusement, love, curiosity, joy and happiness, which are helpful and essential to the normal development. That means നമ്മൾക്ക് ഒരു നല്ല ഫീലിംഗ് ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ഒരു സന്തോഷം തരുന്ന അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മളെ എക്സൈറ്റഡ് ആക്കുന്ന ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് നമ്മളുടെ വർക്കിനെ ഫോസ്റ്റർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് ഇമോഷൻസിനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ നോർമലി എന്ത് പറയുക, പോസിറ്റീവ് ഇമോഷൻസ് എന്ന് പറയുക. ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾസ് amusement, love, curiosity, happiness, joy, surprise, like that. Okay, so these emotions empower individuals to be healthier and more successful in all areas of life. Always we tell others that be positive, right? Be positive in the sense you have to be positive in terms of your emotions and in terms of your thoughts, right? So that is we are denoting when we use the term be positive. Like that, it's related with hope, optimism. So emotions can be classified or grouped as positive emotion based on whether they are giving the individual a feel good position. Okay, so it helps to broaden our thoughts and undo negative emotions, enhance the resilience of the individual. So experiencing positive emotions has a enormous impact on the life and success of the individual. So when moving into the negative emotions, we know the ulta, right? The emotions that bring us down or that make us feel bad is categorized in this group. So unpleasant emotions like fear, anger, jealousy, hostility, like which are harmful to the well-being and development of an individual. So keep in mind that being anger, being jealous, being envious to others not only affect our relationship with others, but also it impede our well-being and development, our own well-being and development. If we are constantly experiencing or constantly keeping such kind of negative emotions with us, it will definitely affect our daily happiness or our subjective well-being. Okay, so unpleasant emotions are grouped as negative emotions. So they sap one's energy and definitely undermine our effectiveness. So now let's move to the next criteria, that is primary versus secondary emotions. So when looking to the primary emotions are our direct reactions to external events, our direct reactions to external. What is the first response or direct response when we are confronting with an external stimulus is called as primary emotion. So they are called primary because they come first as our first response, and they are basic emotions like fear, anger, joy, sadness, acceptance, disgust, expectancy and surprise. This term I will explain in the next class when we are dealing with the evolutionary theories of emotion, that is Plutchik's concept. Just look into this. And the secondary emotion. Secondary emotion is an emotional response to a primary emotion. So when we are emotionally responding, that emotion is arised from another emotion. That emotion is called secondary emotion, or the mix-up of two emotions is becoming a next emotion. That emotion is called secondary emotion or mixed emotion or complex emotion. An emotion about what you feel right now. How that word coming from us? Based on our one negative emotion. So that kind of feeling is termed as secondary emotions. So example, you are angry because you are sad. Okay, you are happy because you are surprised. Like that, secondary emotions can be defined. These concepts we will explain in detail when we are dealing with the evolutionary theories of emotions. Okay, I hope you could follow what I am said. So let's meet in the next class. Thank you.